Hey, my name is Joey, and I want to share with you one of my all-time favorite stories. And it's one of my favorites because it had such a deep impact on me and was really responsible for changing my life in a lot of great ways. And it's a true story written by a guy named John Robbins, and you may have heard of a company that his dad started called Baskin-Robbins. You know, that ice cream chain with 51 flavors. So as you can imagine, growing up, he was in a very wealthy household. Big house, ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool. His cats were named after different ice cream flavors. And from a young age, he was primed and expected to eventually take over his father's company that had billions of dollars in sales every year. Lucky guy, right? Well, fortunately for me and you and millions of other people, he didn't do that. In fact, he wanted nothing to do with Baskin-Robbins. And so in his early 20s, with his wife, he moved to a small island off the coast of British Columbia, where they built a little one-room cabin where they lived for the next 10 years, growing most of their own food and some years spending less than $1,000 total. He's a pretty fascinating guy, but this story isn't about him. It's actually about someone he met while he was doing some research for a book he was writing called Diet for New America. He really wanted to know the ins and outs of where and how our food was being produced in the United States. And so he found himself on a small family-run farm in Iowa with a farmer he'd never met before. And he asked this farmer if he could take a tour around his property. And for whatever reason, this big, bulky farmer was kind enough to let John Robbins on a tour of what he called his pork production facility, which means he raised pigs. And so as they're going around the property, they come up on this warehouse where all the pigs are held. And what do you think the first thing that John Robbins notices when he walks into this warehouse? If you've ever driven down the highway and seen cows on the side of a road, what do you notice? Probably it doesn't smell too good, right? Well, now imagine walking into a warehouse with no open air, not much ventilation, and there's thousands of animals in cages inside of there. Probably doesn't smell too good, right? So John Robbins was immediately hit with this smell, was nauseous, and wanted to get out as soon as possible. But then he started to think about what it would be like for these animals, because he knew that pigs didn't have the same sense of smell that humans do. Pigs actually have 200 times the concentration of cells that detect scent in their noses compared to humans. So they have 200 times more powerful sense of smell. And here they are in these cages that they can't move, stuck there for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with this smell in these torturous conditions. And as John Robbins is thinking about this, one of the pigs lets out this loud squeal, and he sees the farmer kind of wind back and kick one of the cages with all his might, and it lets out this loud echo that goes through the whole warehouse, and then all the pigs start making noises, making this sad situation even more unpleasant. But then it's interrupted by the farmer's wife. She comes in and has a word with him. And John Robbins can't hear what they're saying, but he sees that the farmer kind of looks like he's in pain while he's talking to her, and he finds out why in a minute. And the farmer comes over to John Robbins and says, "The wife would like to know if you'd want to stay for dinner." And John Robbins says, "Yes, I'd be delighted to." And he doesn't know why he says it, but he did. And he finds himself at a dinner table with this family. And I haven't mentioned up to this point in the video, but John Robbins doesn't eat any animal products. And the family serves him pork, but he kind of gets around it by saying his doctor was worried about his cholesterol, so he would pass on that. But the conversation is going smoothly enough. They're talking about the boys' little league. They're talking about the weather, just making small talk. And everything's going good until the conversation kind of stops. And the farmer points his finger at John Robbins and says, kind of growling, he says, "Sometimes I wish you animal rights people would just drop dead." And now John Robbins is scared. But to make things even worse, the two sons get up from the table, run out of the room, slam the door, and turn up the TV. And at the same time, the wife leaves the room, closes the door, turns on the sink in the kitchen. And now John Robbins is terrified. Here he is in the middle of Iowa on this stranger's farm with this big guy sitting across from him who just kind of said he wishes that he would drop dead. And he doesn't know what to do. So he tries to calm down, tries to take a few deep breaths, thinks about the situation, and he says, what is it that they're saying that's so upsetting to you? And the farmer says, they accuse me of mistreating my stock. John Robbins says, well, why would they say such a thing like that? And the farmer goes into this long reply about exactly what they're saying about him, why they don't like the things that he's doing, about how he doesn't like to be called cruel. And John Robbins starts to relax because he realizes that this man doesn't mean any harm to him. He just needs to vent his frustration. This farmer is frustrated because he's not happy with a lot of the things that he has to do in his job. He's not happy that he has to keep the animals in small cages. He's not happy that he has to give them so many drugs. He doesn't like that he has to take the babies away from their moms as soon as they've given birth. He doesn't like any of this, but for him, it's all he knows how to do. And he really can't change his ways because there's big agricultural companies that have a financial advantage over him. And if he was to do anything differently, he'd be out of business, and he was barely getting by as it was, doing everything he could to just kind of make ends meet. And so he's talking to John Robbins about everything that he doesn't like about the future of factory farming. And then all of a sudden, a troubled look comes over his face and he stops talking. And his head falls into his hands. And John Robbins is nervous now. He's wondering if he had a stroke, if he had a heart attack. So he says, what's happening? And after a couple minutes, the farmer replies, he says, nothing. And I don't even want to talk about it anyway. And then he continues talking about everything that he hates about the future of factory farming again. But the same thing happens. After a couple minutes, this look of sadness comes over his face and he says, you're right. And John Robbins doesn't know what he's talking about. He says, you're right, no animal deserves to be treated like that, especially hogs. Did you know that they're really intelligent animals and they're kind if you treat them right? But I don't. And then he says that he's having this memory is coming back to him, something he hasn't thought about in so many years. And he starts talking about his childhood, how he grew up on this small farm in Missouri, kind of a picturesque farm with the green fields and pastures and animals running around freely, and they all had their own names. But his dad ran the farm with an iron fist, just not a happy guy. And he didn't have any brothers or sisters, he was an only child, and they didn't really have any neighbors close by. So he would get lonely, and he had to seek out companionship with the animals. The animals were really his best friends there. And he talked about this one pet pig that he had. And he starts telling stories about this pig, and his whole voice, his intonation changes, his face lights up. He starts getting excited, he looks happy. And he shares stories about how it was so hot in the summer, and so at night it would be cooler to sleep in the barn, so that's what he would do. And every night this pet pig of his would come up and lay right next to him and ask to get her belly rubbed, and he would gladly do that. He talked about swimming in this pond on the property, how he loved to do it, but this one dog would always jump into the pond and kind of get a little too rough and be scratching him. And then the pet pig that he loved so much would jump in the water kind of right between them and act as a mediator or a lifeguard. And as he's telling these stories, John Robbins is loving listening to this guy. He's enjoying these stories. And then for the third time, he kind of stops talking and that sad look comes over his face again. And John Robbins says, well, you know, what happened to your pig? And the farmer says, my dad made me butcher it. And he says, I tried to hide, I tried to run away, but I couldn't. They found me. And then my dad gave me a choice. He said, you either slaughter that animal or you're no longer my son. And so I did. And now this guy's really crying. He's got tears streaming down his face. And John Robbins realizes that he was so quick to judge this man as callous and heartless. And this wasn't the case at all. He was actually someone who cared very deeply. He just had to build a wall around his feelings, had to block out his emotions, had to try and forget what he knew, had to try and forget that he had been forced to kill his best friend as a child. And now he raised and killed these animals for a living. The two of them talked for hours that night about what else he could possibly do. He learned that the farmer didn't have a high school diploma. He was barely literate. He was getting older and didn't have that many skills. Didn't have that many job options. Things were looking bleak for this man. And when John Robbins got up to leave that night, he kind of jokingly said to the farmer, "Who knows, maybe you'll grow broccoli or something." And the farmer kind of just looked at him and didn't say anything. He actually looked kind of confused. But the two of them left that night as friends, and they stayed in touch. And when John Robbins' book eventually came out, Diet for New America, he sent this farmer a copy of it because in the book he had a little summary of this encounter with this farmer. He left out a lot of the details so no one could identify this farmer. But he wrote a little note attached to the book, and he said, "I hope you liked the way I wrote about you." And a few weeks later, John Robbins got a letter in the mail from this farmer. And I want to read you some of what this farmer wrote. The farmer said, "Dear Mr. Robbins, thank you for the book. When I saw it, I got a migraine headache." He went on to explain that the headaches had gotten so bad that, as he put it, the wife had suggested to him he should perhaps read the book. She thought there might be some kind of connection between the headaches and the book. He said that this hadn't made much sense to him, but he had done it because the wife was often right about these things. He said, "You write good." And John Robbins said that those 3 words meant more to him than when the New York Times praised his book profusely. He went on to say that reading the book was very hard for him because the light it shone on what he was doing made it clear to him that it was wrong to continue. The headaches, meanwhile, had been getting worse until that very morning when he finished the book, having stayed up all night reading. He went into the bathroom and looked into the mirror. "I decided right then that I would sell my herd and get out of this business. I don't know what I will do though. Maybe I will, like you said, grow broccoli." And it turns out that that's what he did. He sold his farm in Iowa, sold all of his animals, and moved back to Missouri, where he bought a small farm where he now grows vegetables organically. And yet he still has a few pigs. He's got about 10 of them, but he doesn't keep them in cages and he doesn't kill them. He actually has contracts with local schools for his Pet a Pig program, where kids come in on buses. They get to see the animals up close and personal, see how kind and intelligent they really are, get to give them a little belly rub. This farmer is now doing better off financially, is in better health, and is leading a much happier life as a result of all of this. I love this story of the farmer who realized that what he was doing was wrong, knew that he had so much to lose by changing directions, and yet at the end of the day, he decided to walk away from it all because it was the right thing to do. For the first 19 years of my life, I didn't think about the food that I ate, didn't know where it came from, didn't care where it came from. But when I really thought about it, I realized that I did care. And after reading The Food Revolution, the book that this story is featured in, I realized that what I was doing was wrong, and I could no longer continue consuming animal products. And ever since that day, almost 7 years ago, I haven't. Right now, we're so far removed from where our food comes from. It's not your fault if you haven't thought about the animals that are used and killed to produce this food. We live in a society where this is hidden and not talked about, but it's catching on. Meat consumption in the United States has hit a plateau and is continuing to decline. As more and more people consciously think about their food choices and realize the amount of pain and suffering that goes into producing a glass of milk or a piece of meat, they're left with the option of going vegan. And yet, unlike the farmer who had so much to lose by changing what he knew was wrong, most of us don't have anything to lose at all. In fact, we have so much to gain by going vegan. It's better for you, it's better for the environment, and it's better for the animals. I'd like to ask you to consciously think about your food choices. Ask yourself if it's really worth it. And I'd encourage you to live congruently with your thoughts, your words, and your actions. I want to share this short video that I filmed with my girlfriend in upstate New York at a farm sanctuary, where we got to meet some of these animals who were given a second chance at life.
Like his little hairdo? Whoa, did you see how it just like sucked up? Oh my god. I am just as curious about you, buddy, don't worry. Yum. Every one of these special beings we visited with today is capable of thinking, feeling, and experiencing life. The animals we saw today were the lucky ones. Unfortunately, more than 160 million animals just like them are killed every day. Many of them never getting to see the sun, feel the ground beneath their feet, or even spread their wings. From the day they're born until their lives are cut short, they experience pain, sadness, and fear. All of this is done in the name of pleasing our taste buds. If you wouldn't want this kind of life for yourself, please don't inflict it upon these innocent creatures who value living just as much as we do. Join the growing number of caring and healthy individuals who have made the decision to stop consuming and using animal products by going vegan. It's easier than you think and more gratifying than you can imagine.
That's pretty powerful, right? For more information about how you can follow a vegan lifestyle, please visit the links in the description of this video.